We're led to think that anarchism is bomb-throwing mayhem. What is it that attracts you to anarchism?
Alrighty, yeah, here we are, 3 months later, with the interesting question, is anarchism bomb-throwing mayhem or the answer to concentration of wealth and power? Well, you know, I would have actually voted bomb-throwing mayhem, and why are you even asking such a question, you idiot, before I looked a little bit more into the topic. And now I'm asking myself, hey, was I actually the idiot for simply, you know, buying into what the media tells me about anarchism instead of doing my own research? In order to dissect the topic a little bit further, we're going to look at one of my favorite film franchises, Pirates of the Caribbean. We're going to particularly look at Dead Man's Chest and At World's End, which in my opinion is slightly underrated, but hey, this is not the topic of that video. And yeah, we're going to look at the dynamic between the East India Trading Company, which is based on the real East India Company, and the pirates. And you might ask yourself, now, how's this relevant to, you know, anarchism? Well, what's more to say than that pirates are the poster child for anarchism, right? And to be honest, even though I watched Pirates of the Caribbean multiple times, I never really looked much into the role that the East India Trading Company plays in these films. Because let's be honest, in film 2, Davy Jones was much more of an interesting antagonist. And in film 3, I don't know, it was just about a bunch of different players, you know, representing their interests and scheming against each other. And I was not necessarily too interested in the interests of the East India Trading Company because boring. But then I had one of these rare moments where I actively engaged my brain and thought to myself, hey, duh, East India Trading Company.
The world is shrinking, the blank edges of the map filled in.
Perfect example of concentration of wealth and power. So yeah, let's jump into the deep dive of how Pirates of the Caribbean exemplifies being an anarchist in a world ruled by capitalism and the game for profit. So you thought Google, Amazon and Apple are the real deal? Well, wrong. It is not. The forefather of capitalism is the East India Company, a corporation which at its height was a, profit-making power machine which controlled almost all of the Indian subcontinent. You see, according to the articles I've read and the podcast episode with William Dalrymple I've listened to, the Indian subcontinent was one of the most sought-after economies in the 17th century. And that was mainly due to their spices, fabrics, and other luxury goods, which were highly in demand in Western Europe. And guess how much the East India Company achieved so much success in the, Indian subcontinent? Well, it was because Queen Elizabeth Queen Elizabeth I granted a bunch of English wealthy businessmen and merchants the sole right to trade within the Indian subcontinent. And thus, a monopoly was born. And you see, while the mortality rate of employees of the East India Company was 30%, the profits that stakeholders and investors were able to reap from the East India Company were also up to 30%. And I feel like, yeah, the math is definitely adding up here. Ultimately, the East India Company grew to be a corporation with an army twice the size of the British standing army. And they were also responsible for half of Britain's trade. So they were essentially controlling the subcontinent with merchant statesmen, aka company directors, CEOs, yo. And these company directors dictated the policies within the territory of the East India Company. So yeah, no wonder that the government bailed out the company repeatedly when they faced financial troubles. I mean, we gotta protect our poster child for capitalism gone wrong, right? right? So how are they taken down in the end, you might ask yourself? The short answer is the Indian Revolution, also called India's First War of Independence. And in the aftermath of the revolution, the British government seized what was left of the East India Company. But even though the company was dissolved, we can still feel the effects of their influence nowadays. And I think the following quote by Emily Erickson is the one that stood out most to me. It's hard to understand the global political structure without understanding the role of the company. I don't think we'd have a global capitalistic economic system that looks the way it does if England hadn't become so uniquely powerful at this point in history. They transitioned into a modern industrial force and exported their vision of production and governance to the rest of the world, including North America. It's the cornerstone of the modern liberal global political order. So yeah, exciting times, right? And while the East India Trading Company within the Pirates of the Caribbean universe is merely based upon the East India Company, it gives us a pretty good insight into what the fictional East India Trading Company was all about. And bear with me, we're soon gonna discuss all of these juicy pro points for anarchism. But for now, let's look at the objective of the East India Trading Company. Within the realm of Pirates of the Caribbean. Well, their objective was to eradicate piracy. And well, I mean, the pirates fought against that for obvious reasons. But you know, the thing is, I never really questioned much why the East India Trading Company is so hell-bent on eradicating piracy. Out of a good moral conscience and because they want to rid the world of criminals and thieves that threaten your livelihood? Wrong. It is to ensure that they can expand their growing business. They want to be the dominating force within the Caribbean Sea. And in order to be the dominating force within the Caribbean Sea, they have to eradicate the pirates first. You know, the good thing though is that they expand their power under the moral guise of righteousness, when in actuality they're merely a mirror image of piracy themselves. Oh, the irony. Or as Wesley Pugh puts it, the East India Trading Company led by Cutler Beckett is an allegory for restrictions on personal liberty as a result of the war on terror. But you know, inflicting terror onto the world is completely justified if you're fighting against criminals. Okay, not to romanticize piracy, but for a second here, let's romanticize piracy. According to our very reliable source Wikipedia, pirates did adopt social mechanisms which resembled libertarian, democratic, federal, egalitarian, fraternal, and communal ideas. They were also less conscious of national, religious, and racial differences than what was common. E.g., women were able to enjoy the same freedoms of life aboard a pirate ship as men. The English ruling class recognized the influence of libertalia and its alternative social order, and they soon put their efforts into quashing it. There were worries of a pirate commonwealth, especially one in areas where no nation would be able to fight them. English rulers responded by hanging sea robbers by the hundreds, and the English Parliament passed new legislations persecuting pirates. So the question here is, were the pirates persecuted because they were criminals or because they were, threatening the order of the ruling class? Well, the answer of that question is sort of obvious. It becomes even more obvious when we look at, the interaction between Lord Cutler Beckett and Jack Sparrow. So there's this deleted snippet in the third film.
We had a deal, Jack. I contracted you to deliver cargo on my behalf. You chose to liberate it.
People aren't cargo, mate.
People aren't cargo, mate. Yes. Someone who refers to people as cargo definitely doesn't seem to have in mind eradicating piracy to protect the common folk from criminals. It's all about advancing the interests of the East India Trading Company and their pursuit of wealth and power. And now we finally arrived at the most important part of this video. What has this to do with anarchism, aka bomb-throwing mayhem? Let's take another look at what Chomsky has to say about anarchism.
The mainstream of it has just been the basic principle, which I think comes straight out of classical liberalism and the Enlightenment, that any form of authority and domination has a burden of proof to bear. It has to demonstrate that it's legitimate doesn't matter what it is, whether it's inside a family or the global economy. If it is a form of authority and domination and coercion, it has to show that it's legitimate.
Sounds reasonable. I mean, I don't know if I'm missing something here, but it's clearly confusing to me why anarchism is portrayed in such a negative way within our society, especially when it's essentially just about challenging, the legitimacy of any form of authority and domination. Taking the East India Trading Company as an example, I mean, well, it shouldn't really be difficult to challenge their legitimacy. And looking at the dynamic between the East India Trading Company and the pirates, one can quickly tell that the pirates don't shy away from challenging the legitimacy of the East India Trading Company. The East India Trading Company attempts to take over the sea, and the pirates are like, you wish. And then you could make the argument that they don't really have another choice, because what else are they going to do? They have to defend themselves. If your existence is threatened, of course you're going to defend yourself, right? But then when we actually look at the dynamic between the East India Trading Company and the most important players in this film, such as Jack, Will, and Elizabeth, we can see that all three of them have the choice to, step over to the other side. They chose to challenge the authority of the East India Trading Company and their attempts to take over the sea. The pirates are a representation of anarchism, while the East India Trading Company is a representation of capitalism and the concentration of wealth and power. The East India Trading Company wants to take over the sea. The pirates don't subject themselves to that, and that despite the fact that their chances to, defeat the East India Trading Company or to challenge the East India Trading Company appear to be slim to none. And this is due to the East India Trading Company being a monopoly. And let's not forget that it was the Indian Revolution that brought down the real East India Company. I'm not trying to advertise for revolutions, by the way, but you know what? Let me pin this thought for another video. Anyway, the principles of anarchism go even further than challenging the legitimacy of any form of domination and authority. At their very simplest, anarchist beliefs turn on to two elementary assumptions. The first is that human beings are, under ordinary circumstances, about as reasonable and decent as they are allowed to be, and can organize themselves and their communities without needing to be told how. The second is that power corrupts. And again, we can see that in the way the pirates structure themselves and in the way that they abide by the pirate code, a guideline on how to actually conduct themselves. Anarchism is not about throwing all of the rules out of the window. It's about the freedom to not have an authority impose their decisions upon you, especially if that authority, A, doesn't have your best interests in mind, and B, is so powerful that they have way more leverage than you, which does make any negotiation kind of pointless. Because it's not like you actually have a say. They might let you think that you have a say, but deep down they know that you don't. And deep down you also know that you don't. And let me emphasize this again. I'm not trying to, romanticize piracy. I'm also not trying to say, let's drop everything and adopt the anarchist lifestyle. It's more about looking at what we can learn from certain anarchist ideas as opposed to rejecting the concept altogether. Because the truth is, anarchism is not really popular within our society today. It actually gets a very bad rep. And why is that? Well, my first bet would be that it's because anarchist ideas, threaten the order of the ruling class. It proposes an alternative social order which could negatively influence the interests of the ruling class. And therefore, those kind of ideas have to be squashed. Anarchists are simply people who believe human beings are capable of behaving in a reasonable fashion without having to be forced to. It is really a very simple notion, but it's one that the rich and powerful have always found extremely dangerous. The thing is, historically speaking, anarchists have made it very easy for the ruling class to discredit their ideas.
And as soon as you put yourself outside of the systems and you say, one, I'm going to fight your systems because I think they're wrong. Two, I'm going to expose the values that you hold dear as being false. And three, and I'm going to fight you by methods that you don't approve of. It's perhaps not surprising that anarchists get a bad name. They look like they're irrational. They look like it's easy to demonize them as irrational.
And so here we are, living in a society where the majority of the population subjects themselves to the authority of the East India Company, so that the minority of the population can enjoy up to 30% of, the profits that are being generated. Which is actually not too far off, considering that, 45% of the global wealth is in the hands of 1% of the global population. Rejecting the utility of anarchist ideas within our societies actually not benefiting you. It traps you within the grasp of authority and domination as opposed to challenging its legitimacy over you. It puts you in a situation where you try to negotiate the best deal for yourself as opposed to trying to claim back your autonomy. And I'm not saying that negotiations are a bad thing. If you're negotiating with someone on a level playing field. The problem is the concentration of wealth and power, which prevents us from having healthy negotiations and competition between two players who have similar leverage. If you don't have similar leverage, it's not a negotiation, it's exploitation. The most common example of this is to be paid for your labor, which essentially means losing some degree of your autonomy as you're selling your time to someone else who can then dictate what you're supposed to be doing with that time. And yes, I get it. I mean, you do it because you have to earn a living, you have to pay your bills. There is no way around that. Believe me, I understand. And I also understand that there are levels to that. I mean, there are people out there who are fortunate enough that they had a prestigious education, which they could leverage to get in-demand skills, which they then could leverage to get the job that they desire. But the truth is that I feel like we're moving towards a society in which the majority of the population don't have the leverage it needs to actually negotiate a good deal for themselves. And we can see that in our shrinking middle class. So, what now? See, if I would have a revolutionary mastermind planned, I would have shared it with you by now, but I don't. I know, useless. You just wasted your time listening to me for no good reason at all. All I can say is that I think starting to reframe your thoughts by realizing that there might be other options for you out there than subjecting yourselves to authority can be a good starting point. It can also be the first step towards claiming back some of your autonomy. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about anarchism. It's about pulling yourself out of this mental trap, of this belief system that traps you within what's not possible. We were meant to believe that it is normal to lose ownership over your time. It is not normal.
But actually what you've done in your constitution is that you've formally abolished the ownership of people, but you've now put most people in a relationship of enslavement by forcing them to work for others on the owner's terms.
Growing up as kids, most of us probably didn't dream of selling our time to access housing and food. Most of us probably imagined doing something that we believed to be of value. But then we grow up and we abandoned all of these childish thoughts. I mean, grow up. Because now you're in the real world and the real world asks you to behave like an adult. You see, ultimately, people who are in a position of power are not going to challenge themselves. And why would they do so? It works for them. On the contrary, they're going to defend the notion that they're doing something for the greater good. And they're also going to defend the notion that you have to behave like an adult because it works for them. Well, screw them. I'm going to be childish. But it might still be worthwhile to not forget what it feels like being childish. Being an adult sucks, and behaving like an adult to gain status and recognition within our society is a scam. Your time is yours. Your life is yours. And whatever decision you choose to end up making, I do believe that trying to move towards greater autonomy for yourself and having the ability to do something with your time that feels of value to you is important. So as usual, I would love to hear your thoughts on the topic. What do you think about anarchism? Do you think certain anarchist ideas might be of value to our society, especially moving forward? How much of a child are you on a scale from 1 to 10? An even better question, how much of an adult are you on a scale from 1 to 10? And do you hate every second of it? Leave your thoughts in the comments down below. And yeah, I'm gonna see you again in 3 months because procrastination rules.